Alright, so about a month ago, I bought this Intel Arc B580 to support Intel, being that they are kind of like the underdog and I want to support them. But I really should have done like more research to find out exactly what I lose out by not using, NVIDIA. So this is what I've experienced in 4 weeks of using it. Alright, first up, gaming. So I've not had any issues, playing games with the Intel Arc. So mostly I play Deep Rock Galactic and it's been fine. I also played a bit of like Assetto Corsa Competition, iRacing Arcade, and they work fine. However, there is a limited support for older games. For example, like DirectX 9 games, right? Like I like to play Wing Commander Prophecy on and off, and it just no longer runs. It just black screens when you launch it. So also, right, since Intel Arc doesn't support like PhysX games, right? So games that use PhysX either won't run or probably like run terribly. Also, one interesting thing, right, is I like to play like MechWarrior 2 on DOSBox, and when I was playing it on on my 4060, right, usually when I change between the internal cockpit view and the third-person view, right, there'll be like massive stutters and stuff like that. Surprisingly, no stutters on the Arc, so yeah, plus point there. Next up, let's talk about VR. So I have a Quest 3 and I use it for VR chat mainly, right? And I was pretty surprised to find that Steam Link or Air Link, right, it just doesn't work on Intel GPUs. Thankfully, right, it works using virtual desktop. So, while you can't use, the specific features for Steam Link or Air Link, right, at least, virtual desktop is there for us to use. I also like to note that Space Collaborator works fine through virtual desktop. So, if you have like Vive trackers and stuff like that, right, yeah, it should be good to go. Another problem I've encountered running the Arc, right, is my primary monitor not waking up from sleep mode. This only happens when I'm running like a very heavy simulation using on the CPU, with Houdini. Like if it's just like normal sleep mode, right, I don't remember encountering this issue. But yeah, so when I'm running like a heavy simulation and the PC, I go away to let the simulation run, and the monitor goes to sleep, right? When I shake the mouse, right, only my secondary monitor wakes up. So I was looking around for how to solve it. I couldn't find any solutions, but I did find a keyboard like shortcut, right, to sort of like reboot the desktop. So what you do is you hold down Control Shift Windows and then press B, right, and then it will give a like boop, and then somehow it reboots the desktop or something, and yeah, the monitor wakes up. So yeah, if you do encounter your monitors refusing to wake up from sleep, right, maybe try this hotkey combo. Recording gameplay footage in OBS, right, also has no issues with the Intel Arc GPU. I did experience some issues, on the first few days, right? It was like, when I recorded like Deep Rock Galactic, right, and I played back, right, the footage was like jittery as hell. I was like, what is going on here? Ends up, right, it seems that like, I think it's a conflict between the hardware decoders on my CPU versus the the decoder on the Arc itself, because that was resolved after a driver update. And then I also encountered that in DaVinci Resolve, right? But that one was just a settings thing. I'll mention it later. All right, the next is professional stuff. So, you can probably click off if you're not into like visual effects and stuff like that. So first up, Houdini. Houdini works fine for most contexts. Like DOPS, right? It has some nodes that use the GPU through OpenCL, and it seems to work fine. So no complaints there. However, this is the part that really annoys me, right? I did not know that Karma XPU requires CUDA. I always thought it was like a OpenCL or whatever, right? But no, it needs bloody CUDA. So CUDA is like I don't know what exactly, right? It's like a programming interface thing for NVIDIA GPUs, right? So if you don't have a NVIDIA GPU, Karma XPU doesn't work. So I don't really use Karma XPU, for contracts or whatever, but I use like Redshift, which also doesn't work. And well, let's check out on RenderMan XPU. Well, that also doesn't support Arc. So no big deal, right? I can just use like Mantra or Karma CPU. Now, CPU renderers do have their place. For example, right, in production, we always have gigantic scenes that just won't fit on a GPU. So, you just send it to the farm where you got like 128 gig, 256 gig machines, and there are tons of them, right? So you can just render in parallel. For me though, I'm just, just playing around at home and only have one machine, right? So, losing the ability to render on the GPU, right, is highly annoying. Also, my little render issues aside, right, there's also like a lot of applications that do need CUDA to run. For example, right, just a few days ago, I wanted to try Epic's reality scan. So this is a photogrammetry application. Unfortunately, right, I didn't realize that it also needed like CUDA to generate the final high resolution mesh. So like you can use it. I was testing it out. You can do the import and you can do all the tracking, right? But when it comes down to generating the final high-res mesh, yeah, there's a pop-up that says you need a CUDA GPU to do it. So it's like, I also checked in on other software, right? For example, like Substance Painter. I personally don't use Substance Painter anymore, but I did some quick lookups, right? And it seems like some features don't work on Intel Arc, like texture baking and stuff like that. So, instead of taking a few minutes to generate your big texture, right, it will take several hours. So, now another piece of software I use pretty frequently is DaVinci Resolve. I think I didn't have any issues using DaVinci. Like, when you're doing your final export, right, I can see my GPU being properly used. So, all good there. I did have an issue with playback jittering though, specifically for AV1 encoded, recordings. So it seems like there is some kind of playback issue with the decoder. I'm using an AMD CPU, right, and it has a decoder on it for like H.264, H.265. And there's also a decoder for that on the Intel Arc, and somehow there's a conflict. So, but it's very easy to sort out, right? Just go to the settings and then just make sure that the CPU's decoder is not working and it works fine. All right, the final thing I want to bring up is Unreal Engine. So I know I'm right now trying to transition into full-time solo game dev. Intel Arc on Unreal, right? I don't really see any differences compared to my 4060. To be clear, right, I am only using software Lumen. I'm not using any of the advanced features like Megalights or Nana or whatever, right? I'm just using software Lumen, and it's perfectly fine. And the reason I'm only just using software Lumen, right, is software Lumen only needs, I think, was it DirectX 11 or DirectX 12 compatible card, and that's it. So, like, I tested my game on a GTX 970. Like, that's a 14-year-old card. Yeah, and it runs at 60 FPS. So, like, good. I don't want to use any of the newer stuff, right? Because, on older graphics cards, they're probably not going to have a very good CPU as well. So, I'm going to keep things as, low-tech, quote-unquote low-tech with Unreal Engine as possible. But yeah, I did test out, just running, enabling hardware ray tracing and stuff like that on the Intel Arc. It works, so can't tell you more there. So like I've been running the Unreal Engine, right, for most days of the week when I'm doing my game dev, and no issues here. All right, in summary, I think the Intel Arc is a fine gaming card as long as you're playing like modern games and not trying to do like play some old retro game from, I don't know, 2000s and stuff like that. It's way cheaper than the 4060 that I got. So, if you want to save some cash, right, that's something to consider. And for professionals like myself, right, Intel obviously doesn't support a lot of, the packages that we use, right? So I don't think we have any other choice than to use an NVIDIA GPU. Well, if you made it this far, thank you for listening, and, hope you have a good day. Meow.